of not absolute silence, but at least quiet. It's Mindset Monday. Hello, welcome to Mindset Monday with me, Muffy Mendoza, from Brown Mamas. I blog at brownmamas.com. Sure, you can say hi. So, I'm going live from my desktop today, so I don't even see an option to invite any folks. So if you happen to come in on the video, make sure that you share it. Make sure that you invite your friends. And today, our topic for today is cultivating genius in Black children, specifically how us Black mamas, brown mamas, can begin to cultivate genius in our children. And so first, I would just wanted to, operate as always with extreme transparency. I am a homeschooling parent. I homeschool my 3 sons. And we actually, I guess what we do in our home would be more termed unschooling than it would be termed homeschooling. We do a very self-directed approach to education, to learning. We actually ask our children to cultivate their own interest outside of every day. So if you're just wondering what a day in the life of our life looks like, the boys are asked every day, because I have 3 sons, every day they have to do reading, they have to do math, and they have to do writing. And other than that, we kind of leave it up to them to, figure out what they want to learn. And then we just become facilitators of their learning. And for our younger boys, because I do have a 9 and a 10-year-old, we just kind of, what I'm working on right now is just making my home a place where they have access to different things so that they can learn what they want to learn. So that might look like giving them access to paint supplies, giving them access to Legos, giving them access to a workroom where they can build, giving them access to books, giving them a library card. So it looks different for everybody. So today I really wanted to talk about parenting style and how you can cultivate an attitude, really, of genius in your children. Because a lot of times I think that in our culture, we have a tendency to believe that your kid is either born smart or they're not born smart, and which I completely do not believe in that. I believe every child can operate at genius level. It's really just about the parent creating the environment where that is right to happen. And so I wrote down a couple of things in terms of how we can begin to do that. And I will say, this is what I will say, because all 3 of my boys are geniuses, I term them, because they all have unique talents and abilities that they are capable of doing better than anybody else can do them. It's all about how we nurture that in our homes. And so the first thing I wrote down is understanding the now, understanding education, understanding learning from more than just the perspective of ABC 1, 2, 3. I think in Black communities, oftentimes with Black folks, we think about education in terms of what our children is learning in school, instead of understanding that education is a process. Education is a process by where the culture of a society is transmitted into its children. So when you think about education, we need to begin to thinking about why education, whatever education our children are learning, is relevant to who they are going to become, is relevant to the future they're going to exist in, is relevant to really solving the problems that they're going to have throughout their life. And a lot of times we are not cultivating an ideology, we're not cultivating a spirit of genius in our children, because we tend to be educated instead of being educators for our children. So when I say that, I mean that we send our children to school oftentimes, and we are not thinking about the type of education they're receiving and its usefulness in their future, and its ability at this current moment to cultivate in them their own unique talents and abilities. So there is a quote. Let me get my book. Where's my book at? Dad, Jair, go into my room and get me a copy of the Brown Mama Mindset book that's on the bed. There is a quote by Amos Wilson that is actually the leading quote that I lead chapter 13 of my book with, Parenting the Black Way by Amos Wilson. And in the quote, I believe he says, can you go get it now, please? And thank you. Oh, okay. He went and got it. Okay. It says, it is not enough. Thank you. I'm going to read it directly because I don't like to misquote people. But in this Amos Wilson quote, he says, actually, that's chapter 14 of the Brown Mama Mindset. He says, it is not enough to fill African children with knowledge. It must be knowledge that is appropriate. It must be knowledge that is relevant to solving the problems of African people. So we need to start to think about that in terms of how our children are being educated. Is the knowledge that they are receiving in their classroom, in your home, in their after school program, wherever, throughout their life, because most of the learning we do is in life, is it knowledge that is appropriate and relevant to solving the problems of African people? And please do not by any means think that I am saying that they have to solve your problems. I am saying the problems they are going to inherit in the future. You may be able to work out some of the problems in your life that they may not inherit, but they are going to inherit problems in their own future. Is the education, the learning that they're receiving right now relevant to that? There's a book called what is that book called? The Outsiders. It's called The Outsiders by Malcolm Gladwell. And he talks about how genius is actually something that has nothing to do with your child's actually IQ. Most people who operate at a genius level, it is a almost combination of timing, of their own ability throughout their lives to focus in on something that they're really good and to focus in on something that they're really good about. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. Back in the 80s and 90s, there was a big push for social workers because our culture, our society knew that it was creating people through the drug epidemic and through the various social problems that we have in our culture that were going to need social services. So there was a huge push to get women to go into social services. And now we're in modern day where we have people who are in social services, all these people who've gotten these social services degrees. And what has happened? What has happened is social services went from being a good paying job to now most social workers make below $30,000 a year. So we have to begin to think when there are these pushes for, specific educational objectives in our kids' schools, we need to become the ones who begin to research that and study it. Why are they pushing children to go into STEM right now, specifically Black children? Why are children being pushed to go there right now? What is the future outcome of that directive? And we need to be the ones who are on the cutting edge of that, because we're pushing our children into these fields thinking this is going to be the wave of the future. This is going to be the wave of the future. Who said so? Where did you read that at? How do you quantify that? How do you measure that? I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that as African Americans, we have to stop being the educated and become the educators. That means that we have to begin to take the reins in terms of what our children are learning and understanding why they are learning it. And also realizing that our children are inheriting a unique set of problems that people from other cultures are not inheriting. So for that very reason, when we push our kids to go into engineering, to go into math, to go into the sciences, to go into whatever, the question you need to ask yourself is a question that Amos Wilson has been asking for years. Why and for who? Why and for who? Because we know, for example, when you talk about doctors and scientists, the vast majority of scientists are studying diseases that are not related to African American people. Sickle cell, lupus, some of the most underfunded research. They don't get funded to do research for these things, even though they overwhelmingly affect African people. Why, you ask? Because we are not pulling the reins of the education. Because if we were, we would say to our children that it is important, not that they, forsake their own God-given talents and abilities for the sake of their race. I don't believe that. But that they utilize whatever their talents and abilities are to solve the problems of not only their families and themselves, but of their children. Because too often African American people are operating on these generational curses, where we've had these problems for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 20 generations in our family, and nobody is saying to themselves, hey, maybe I might want to raise a couple bricklayers so somebody can build a community here. Maybe I might want to raise a few environmentalists so that we can understand how to cultivate our own food and agriculture and all these things that other cultures are dominating. It's not that we can't dominate in these industries. It's that we need to begin to raise our children to understand that the way in which they use the information, the learning, the education must be appropriate for their communities. It must be appropriate for their people. And so when we talk about raising genius level children, it's not that our children don't have genius in them, because all of our children can be geniuses. It's all about us understanding education and understanding education as a process by which culture and information that is relevant to that culture and that is servant or has a spirit of servitude to that culture into our children. So that's what we've got to begin to understand about education. The second thing we've got to begin to understand about education in order to cultivate genius in our children is that education has to focus on sparking that unique child's creative genius. It must. If it is not, it is irrelevant. How many people on this in this conversation right now went to school and didn't learn anything about their talents or their abilities or their skill set? That is probably the saddest thing about the education of brown children right now, is that our children are not being pushed to cultivate their own personal genius. It doesn't matter if you know algebra if you're meant to be a preacher. It doesn't matter that you know biology if you are meant to be, something that has nothing to do with biology. So education needs to not only focus on giving our children those baseline, understandings. Absolutely, education should focus on making sure our children can read well, making sure our children understand math to the point where they can count their money and understand variables and understand different things that are important. But they also, our children also must be able to tap into their own creative, industrial, dynamic abilities and talents. So really what this means for us, like I said, I'm a homeschooling parent, so this is something that I can do continually. But if you are a parent whose child is in school, please know that you can still do that. Like, make your home a place where your child has the opportunity to express their God-given talents. And not only to express them, but to focus in on them. Because here's the thing, the reason why other cultures have such a head start on us is because, number one, they are the educators of their children. So Middle Eastern people, or let's take Chinese people, they knew that there was an industry they wanted to dominate in. They wanted to dominate as doctors. They wanted to dominate as computer scientists. They wanted to dominate as engineers. So what did they do? They raised them up. And not only that, if you understand Chinese culture, they build video games. I don't know if you guys had heard about this a couple of years back, but they basically have these centers in China where kids can go to and do nothing but play video games. They play video games, they learn how to engineer video games, they learn how to code video games, they learn computer science because they knew they wanted to dominate in that industry. And they knew that they could raise up children who could not only do this, but who could focus on it intensely and focus on it in a way that was not only intense, but it is also culturally driven. So we have to, number one, begin at an early age, not 15, not 16, not 30. How many of us waited until we were 35 to find our life's purpose and then wonder why Black people is behind? Yeah, we're behind because you didn't start working on your life's purpose till you were 35 because you were in school learning algebra and biology and all the stuff you did not need to learn instead of focusing in on what you do well. What is your son? Is your son a woodworker? Can your daughter sew? Does she love fashion? What do your kids like to do? I hate when I run into parents and I ask them, what do your kids do? And they say, oh, they play soccer. They're really good at school. They got A pluses and they're on the honor roll. What does that mean for the future? How many people you know is on an honor roll and can't keep a job? Like, that's real. Like, we need to begin to realize that that is real. And we need to stop staying in our comfort zones in terms of everybody in this day and age knows that the old adage of get a job, do well in school, go to college, get a job doesn't work. So why are we still shoving it down our kids' throats? Why aren't we saying to our children at an early age, what do you like to do? Allowing them to try a myriad of things. And then once they find something they like, saying, I'm going to throw all the resources that I could possibly throw at you so that you can be the best at it. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to change what they like to do. One day they might like woodworking. The next day they might want to drive, in NASCAR. They might change it, but that is a part of the process of becoming great. The process of becoming great is sometimes throwing things up in the wall, but it is also focus and intention in a serious way. So we have to allow our children to have these spaces where they spark their creative genius by being able to focus intensely on what they are good at. And that doesn't mean that we force it. Just FYI. That doesn't mean that you decide, oh, I want Johnny to be an engineer. So you're going to be an engineer. And I'm only going to allow you to operate in engineering space. No, it's not your decision. The one thing that irks me about parents is they will swear to themselves up and down that the God in them said something and then not trust the God in their children. It doesn't make sense. If there's a God in you, then trust me, the God is in the child. So allow the child some say in their life. Allow them some say in what they do. Now, that doesn't mean, like I said, we have to become the educators and stop being educated. We become the educators. So that means we teach our children in a spirit of community. We teach our children in a spirit of cultivating their unique place in the community that they're going to grow into. So we can always provide guidance. We can say if our son, like, for example, my son likes agriculture. So you just pinpoint opportunities for him to engage that way. Our community needs a community garden, or let's start a garden in our house. Let's, whatever you can do to help that child to see that not only do they have unique God-given talents that are special to them, but there is also a special way that they can express that within their own community, amongst their own people, and be just as genius as any other child. Because that is something that we as Black people don't oftentimes understand, that these people are great. These people in other cultures are great, not only because they're great to the world, but because they're great to their people. They are great to their specific people. An Irishman who is a master plumber, he is employed by the Irish people he knows. And he probably, what do they say? He probably practiced with the Irish people he knows before he went on to become a master world-known plumber. We have to get used to giving our children things to chew on that are not just from the world, but are from our neighborhood, or from our community, or from our people. And stop expressing to them that they have to somehow sacrifice their own community, their own people, their own really soul in order to be famous on the world stage. So what does it mean to cultivate genius in Black children? It means that us adults, us African American Black moms and fathers, become the educators of our children and stop allowing them to be educated without any cultural awareness. That's number one. Understand education as a process. Understand education as a process by which society's cultural norms, needs, wants, desires are transmitted into your child. That is what education is. Education has nothing to do with ABC 1, 2, 3. ABC 1, 2, 3 is not education. Education is culture. It is the transmission of cultural norms onto the child. And so therefore, We must become centered in understanding why that education, why that learning is occurring within their education. Learning is kind of like the nucleus. Education would be the cell. So where's that cell going? What message is that cell sending out into the future? And how is that learning going to be utilized in the future? Is it going to be useful for you? Is it going to be useful for your family? Is it going to be relevant to solving the problems that your children are going to inherit? And the second thing is creating an environment in your household and your community, within your child's school, where they have an opportunity to express their unique genius. That is more important than I would say anything. I would say more than anything, you need that, because culture can be transmitted anytime, even though I think it should be transmitted from birth. Our children need to understand the culture that we are either trying to cultivate, or they really do. Culture is transmitted in day-to-day interactions. But your child needs to understand that they have something unique to bring to the table that can be uniquely expressed within your community. And we need to become the guides of that. We need to begin to guide our children in cultivating their own personal genius. So that's what I got today, y'all. I hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to share, please. Please share the video. You can invite your friends to watch. I see your comments. Thank you so much for tuning in. CC, Nicole, my girl, Nicole, Kim, thank you for tuning in. Shantae, Deborah, I appreciate y'all for listening. Make sure you share the video. Make sure you tag your friends in it that you know need to watch it. And I will see y'all on Wednesday for the Brown Mama Blueprint podcast. I will be having Elle Cole, who is a sickle cell advocate, a blogger, and a homeschooling mom, coming onto the show to talk with us. And I look forward to talking with y'all then. All right. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.